Mr. Chairman. Mr. Paulson, Mr. Geithner has testified that he recused himself during this counter-party negotiation. Did you know that while you were Secretary of Treasury?
I knew that.
Just yes or no?
Yes.
You did know. Okay. Did you know
Tim
that
Geithner
he did not sign?
Did not participate in any. I didn't view him as a decision maker. I viewed him as recused.
Did he call you up and advise you that I've recused myself? Did he call you up? How did he notify you?
Well, he told me on the phone that he did not think it would be appropriate for him to be viewed as a decision maker.
Did you know he never got a letter? All he did, he testified that he recused himself. He decided. He put up a flag and said, I recuse myself. I'm not going to be involved with the counter-party negotiation. Didn't get a, like you went to the White House counsel and you went to the Secretary of Treasury, you got a letter. He never got a letter. He never got a written confirmation of his recusal. Did you know that? Do you know that he was just doing it on his own, by his own volition?
I did not know the details.
Okay. Did you think a person who would recuse himself in this crisis we had, that he could go about and operate in his present job and not have a conflict of interest? Did you ever occur to yourself to say, gee, the chairman of the Federal Reserve is in this crisis, we're having the counterparty negotiations, and by golly, he's going to step aside and says he knows nothing about it. That's what he's saying today. Doesn't that seem sort of fakey to you?
No, it didn't, because I thought it was an extraordinary position we had to have a president of the New York Fed Treasury, so I thought it was a reasonable.
He said in open testimony that his chief of staff, while he was chairman of the Federal Reserve, was a former employee of Goldman Sachs. Did you know that?
Yes.
Did you ever call the chief of staff, his chief of staff, former employee of Goldman Sachs, during the process of the counterparty negotiations? Did you ever call? If I go to the logs, will I see your name calling him?
His chief of staff, who was a former employee of Goldman Sachs.
And he worked for you when you were CEO.
Didn't take on that job until after I had left, and he had become Treasury Secretary.
Did you ever call him at all? If I go back to logs, will I find that you called Geithner's chief of staff, former employee of Goldman Sachs, during the counterparty negotiations?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
You never called him?
There's, as I said, the former, his chief of staff, I think the person you're referring to.
Well, we didn't know about it until today.
Is someone who became his chief of staff when he became Treasury Secretary after I had left office.
No, but he said that while he was at the Federal Reserve, he was his chief of staff. That's what he said today.
I don't believe that was the case.
Okay, all right.
But in any event, when he was, when Tim was
let me just go on. I have the time.
I talked with Tim.
Here's the problem that I think a lot of us are having. Mr. Geithner said he was not involved with the counterparty negotiations. You're saying you didn't. You were not involved. Oh, yes, you heard a little bit about it. But on November 6th, when they gave $62 billion to all these parties who came in and looted AIG, all you guys say, I knew nothing about it. And yet it appears that this happened. Now, recently, Michael McWraith, who's director of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, told the Senate Banking Committee, he said, you know, if AIG had gone in bankruptcy, we would have taken care of it. It would have been an orderly disposition. This is what he said. AIG's insurance operations and their other companies would have simply bought up AIG's insurance assets, allowing a seamless delivery of AIG's insurance obligation. So the question is, considering that the state insurance commissioners would likely have seized AIG's insurance subsidiaries, protected policyholders in an AIG bankruptcy, why was it necessary to bail out AIG with taxpayers' money, based upon the testimony of the director of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners?
I respectfully disagree with him, and I believe that if
So you disagree with this guy with all his knowledge and his years of experience?
I will just say many people with years of experience had some regulatory responsibilities with regard to AIG, but this company had a huge problem, and it is case number one on what is wrong with our regulatory system. There was no single regulator that had a line of sight on the total company. So there were regulators that looked at different pieces of it, and if the company had gone down, it would have been a huge mess. Is
your testimony, Mr. Geithner sort of implied, he scares members of Congress, he scares the public, we are all scared. He said if AIG was not bailed out, this country would have collapsed. He intimated our Constitution would not have been able to be enforced. There would be a revolution in this country. Do you think it's at that extreme? If we let AIG go bankrupt, we would have had that kind of collapse and revolutionary spirit in this country? Is that what your position is today?
I certainly have never said that, but
He implied that.
What I've said is I believe we would have had an absolute economic disaster.
And our system of government.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman's time has expired. We'll now recognize the gentleman.